Welcome to The Culture Edit, your weekly roundup of all things work and culture. Hosted by Nikki and Chad Strickland, co-founders of Niche Culture, a strategic consultancy and creative agency helping some of the world's top brands define, articulate, and promote their culture to their employees and the world. All right, episode 4. We're back in the office on a Sunday because we were too tired to record on Friday. We had a really long week. But I actually kind of enjoy getting up early, getting the workout over with, and getting in the office.
Yeah, Sunday the office. It's become the new tradition.
No Sunday scaries, just Sunday productivity.
Exactly.
So let's do a quick recap of our week because it's with the 4th of July. It feels like it's been 2 weeks, but really it's just the same week. So a couple things.
It's a really weird week.
Yeah.
With it being on a Tuesday.
So on Monday, we worked when everyone else was relaxing.
Correct. That was fun. Walking into the office on the Beltline, seeing everyone chilling.
Yeah, but it was fine. And then for the 4th, we actually went on a death march while everyone else is partying at the pool and grilling out. We decided to ride our bikes with our mutant friends all the way down to basically Serenbe and then do a group ride and ride all the way back. I was so dehydrated, my muscles completely shut down.
Our mutant friends, Goose and Brock Mason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to explain why they're mutants a little bit more. Like the average person won't quite understand.
Well, Goose, we lovingly call him Goose. His name's Quentin, and his last name's, it's actually Gossens, but for a long time we thought it was Goosens because that's how it's spelled. So therefore we got the nickname Goose before he corrected us. Eventually.
He's from Belgium, by the way.
Yeah. And then Brock Mason, we've been friends with for a long time. But the two of them, the reason we call them the mutants is because they're just ridiculous freaks of nature on the bike. I mean, Brock just got 7th in the national championship time trial. And I think he was the only non-World Tour guy in the top 10.
Definitely the only guy with a job.
Definitely the only guy with a full-time job. So super impressive. Just great guy, strong guy. And then, Goose is just, I don't know if it's the Belgian water or what they're feeding them over there.
Cobbles.
The cobbles. But he is tough. Also, he's a PhD. He's a biomechanical engineer. I think I got that right. So super smart, works a lot, but rides really, really hard.
And shout out to Goose's dad, our Belgian listener.
Yeah.
So, it was a big day. Everyone else was grilling out, and we rode 90 miles, just to clarify that. And it was really hot, and it was really hard. And it set the tone for the week because we were pretty much destroyed after that.
Yeah, I was... when you push yourself... Well, I was already just having kind of a bad day on the bike because of various reasons. But when you push yourself that hard, you almost feel like you have the flu for the next couple of days.
Yeah. Were you in your luteal phase? Is that
very
is
good?
That what you call it?
Yeah, I'm teaching him.
Okay.
Not to get into all kinds of scientific female anatomy, but yes, the luteal phase right before the time of the month is probably the worst time for any woman to train intensely, and your hormones are at their all-time high. It's hard to explain to guys, but you basically just feel. I think your VO2 max drops by like 20%. When training during this week or so. But I didn't want to miss out riding with my friends, so I just torture myself. But feeling a little bit better now.
Yeah, it's always funny riding with guys, and if you're struggling, the guys will be like, "What's going with Nikki? Why is she
what's
struggling?"
wrong with her?
Yeah, and it's impossible to explain because
and it's awkward. It's kind of like uncomfortable topic.
Yeah, I always say she's just not feeling good.
Yeah. So, gentlemen out there, if you see a lady athlete, endurance athlete especially, struggling, know that it's not for lack of trying. It could literally be that our bodies are just raging with hormones.
Yeah.
It's fun.
We didn't talk about, before that, though, we went to a new restaurant in Inman Park. We've had a lot of questions about this. It's a
vegan
restaurant, but very popular.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of locations around America. I first saw, it's called Planta, and they have, I think maybe a couple in Miami, but the one that I think of is Planta Queen in Coconut Grove. And so we hadn't actually eaten there, but They opened up one up right next to our office. So we went there, made a reservation. It was really good. The food was really good. For vegan, I mean, we're not vegans, so it's not like a huge draw for us, but it was really, really, really good.
You were more impressed than I was. I would
Well,
not say
I
it was
think
really, really good.
it goes in line with more of what I like to eat, more than what you like to eat. Like they had a vegan Thai lettuce wrap, and so it was essentially just like vegetables and tofu. And
Which is what you make at home.
Yeah, which is what I make
week.
at home for, a fraction of the price. So for me, it was more, I didn't feel that guilt of eating gluttonously at a restaurant, but the price point was absolutely insane. I mean, I don't think I'd go back for a while just because I thought we were in New York or South Beach.
Yeah, very, very expensive for Atlanta. It's in Krog Street Market, if you know where that is. It's in the location that's really been a kind of a doomed restaurant. I think we said there's been 3 or 4 restaurants have been in that one space. I predict that they'll continue with that streak. I just do not think they will survive at that location. They've got one in Buckhead. I think they'll be fine. But
I think Buckhead will be cool because it's that people anticipate spending a lot of money when you go out to eat in Buckhead. And it's in like that little Buckhead Village area. Or I don't know if it's called the Village, but it's in that area with all the shops. So it's more of an experience where I just think it's in Krog Street is kind of, I don't know. I don't think the experience is that great. It's like a food stall. So you're looking out the window from the restaurant and you're just looking at people going and picking up food from food stalls. You're not looking out at the ocean.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than the scene in Miami for sure.
Also, the service was fine, but the staff, which having worked in a lot of restaurants growing up, this always bothers me, were extremely uneducated about the menu. And the reason that bothers me is because that's so much on you. Like, yes, the manager, you're in charge of training people and that's on them as well. But when you work at that high end of a restaurant, it's on you to study the menu, to know the menu, to learn how to pronounce things on the menu. I ordered a glass of rosé and the guy was like, "Oh, you ordered your rose wine."
Yeah.
And, I'm not trying to be like a wine snob or anything, but there's just little things like that contribute to an experience where if I was paying $10 for a meal and $5 for rose wine, I wouldn't care. But if I'm paying $40 for tofu and $20 for rosé,
yeah.
I just want that experience. I want to feel like you tried to educate yourself around the menu.
What drove me crazy, though, is their signature is fake sushi. So they make it look like it's real sushi. Like what's confusing is it says tuna. Like the sushi was...
They call everything by the name of like whatever protein it is, but it's not. So that's a little... Tuna. Yeah, that's a little confusing.
So think about how confused people are going to be when they go in there and see that menu.
Yeah, if you're not a vegan... You're definitely going to be confused.
I was confused.
We were like, is this a pescatarian place or is this vegan? And they're calling it like vegan watermelon.
Yeah, so
watermelon tuna.
I got tuna nigiri, which was eggplant, looked like tuna, looked exactly like tuna. It's their signature dish. And the rice fell apart.
You couldn't even pick it up.
You couldn't pick it up.
With chopsticks, which is all we had.
Right. So how does that make sense?
It was super frustrating.
Right. I don't know. They won't survive. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, you did girls' night
at Umi in Buckhead,
which is worth the experience is worth it.
I really like Umi because the sushi is just, I think, I don't know if there's a better sushi restaurant in Atlanta. It always just tastes, the taste is just off the charts, the offerings. I still don't feel like it's necessarily worth the price point. It's so expensive. It blows my mind. And I know that I'm a little bit of a cheaper person when it comes to food, just because I don't enjoy food enough to pay that much money like other people do. But
you think it's better than MF?
We haven't been to MF in so long, but I ordered this. I've been to Umi a lot. We always do girls' nights at Umi. And it is like a really great vibe. Service is amazing. The servers are super knowledgeable about everything, which is great because I always have a lot of questions. And my friend Danny told me to try, I guess it's like a box sushi where they press the rice into a box and then press whatever fish on top, which I got like the fatty tuna toro on top of it, and then they chop it into pieces so it doesn't have the seaweed or anything. I guess it's like a Osaka style type of sushi. I'm not a sushi connoisseur, so people that are, just take a chuckle at me describing this and then move on.
Yeah.
It was so good. Incredible.
I've never had that.
It was really good.
Good. And this was for Ava's birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
The annual Ava's birthday dinner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ava's birthday, girls' night. It was fun.
Cool.
Then we went next door to, I guess, Umi has like a speakeasy type bar where you have to have a passcode, and I think Caitlin made reservations like 2 months in advance. And it's a cool vibe. I just ordered some wine, so it wasn't super. I didn't test the cocktail waters, but it looked like everyone had some nice martinis.
And this is a girl group. I mean, y'all really rage. I think you got home at 9:30 or 10. This is typically like, that's pretty late for you.
Well, I left.
Caitlin was out till 10.
Yeah, I was the first one to leave. I felt kind of bad about it, but we've been working so many hours, and then we've been trying to. I think I did like 10 hours in the gym last week, 10 hours on the bike, and then a bazillion hours in the office. So I was just so tired by the time I got to this dinner. So yeah, I think I left at like 9, and then Caitlin made it till like 10.
Yeah. So this group of girls, different priorities. Work out in the morning is number one, so that's why everyone has to go to bed.
Well, Ava stayed out till 3:30 and still got up in the morning and worked out. So wow. I'm even more impressed with her.
That is
But
impressive.
she's got, like the young and rage genes where you can just rage all night and then get up and be super productive.
Yeah, in your 20s, you can do that.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore.
Cool.
So Tour de France recap.
Tour, we're over 1 week in. As of today, we just watched the finish of the stage.
And whose pick is winning?
Vingegaard is still winning, but just barely 17 seconds. Pogacar dropped him today. Pogacar's, in my opinion, is looking stronger. He's getting stronger every day. He's attacked him. Pogacar's won a stage. Vingegaard has not won a stage. So it's a two-man race. It's exactly what everyone thought. It's just going to come down to the mountains with these guys. They're both really good time trialists. They'll have a few seconds in between, but otherwise, two-man race. The big news: Matteo Jorgensen, who is an American, even though he doesn't sound like an American, almost won today. Would have been huge. He's a young kid. I think he's like 22, 23 years old. Last year, he also was about to win a stage and he crashed. So that would have been awesome, but he got passed at the last 50 meters of this stage today. And then the other big news is Mark Cavendish crashed out of the race yesterday. Supposedly his last Tour de France ever. He's tied for the most stage wins of all time with Eddie Merckx. So everyone was hoping that he was going to beat that. The day before he got second, he almost won a stage, which would have been amazing, but everyone loves Cav, and so it hurts pretty bad to see him crash out of the race in his last one. But you don't think it's going to be his last?
No, he's like Tom Brady.
He's going to come back.
He says he's going to retire, then he comes back. He says he's going to retire, then he comes back. Cav will be back.
He's 36, I think, so he's
not that old.
I appreciate you saying that. He's getting up there for pro cyclists. I mean, there's guys that race to 40. He could still do it. He could come back for another year if he wants to. Maybe he will. I don't know. I think he's just mentally exhausted. I think he's ready to.
Maybe family dynamics. I mean, he has like 3 kids, I think.
Yeah.
Just ready to be papa.
Yeah. So we'll see. But that's the tour. It's going to be exciting between these two guys. One thing I was thinking about this to point out to people that don't watch pro cycling, but they do watch the Tour de France, which is what most people do. They just watch the Tour de France. One thing that we were talking about. Look at everyone's got a uniform, like a different uniform, team uniform on, but look at everyone's shoes. What color are they?
White.
Everyone's shoes are white. Every single person's shoes, except for maybe 5 guys, and they're weirdos. They wear black shoes.
You hate black shoes.
Victor Campenaerts being number 1, a Belgian. He wears black shoes with white socks, which is like a terrible fashion
faux
pas. I think it's interesting for non-cycling people to watch the Tour de France and just look at that. Like everyone's wearing white shoes and white socks. Everyone.
It's the white shoe revolution.
Yeah.
I wore non-white shoes yesterday on the Tucker ride, and I apparently got demerits for not wearing white shoes.
It was controversial.
It was I am a controversial human.
I heard several people talking about it. You wore,
Probably.
we call them, what color? We call it niche blue because it's part of our brand. So
It's
it's like
like
a
a
green
teal.
teal.
Like
Yeah.
a teal, yeah. I
Minty
like 'em.
teal. Yeah,
Right.
I think it was cool, but it was very controversial. You
Controversial.
not
That's
wearing
me.
white shoes.
Also, what I noticed in the Tour de France is so obviously anyone that's been listening to the news knows that France, mostly Paris, is just chaos. Like they're 3 years behind us with the chaos menu. And so all of these things are happening all through Paris.
Riots.
Riots, everything. I'm not going to go into it because you can just read about Google it in 2 seconds on your phone. And that's not the point. The point is the French president is just chilling in the back of the car in the Tour de France, sipping champagne, leaning out the window and waving at everyone while the biggest city in his country is literally burning to the ground, basically.
Yeah, he don't care.
Yeah. He's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
French.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very French thing to do.
Yeah. So do we want to dig into the culture edit?
I want to mention one other thing before we do that, that I think is really important because our reviews of TV shows and movies, we've heard people are very interested in these, like The Bear.
Oh, yeah.
Again, The Bear, highly recommended.
So good.
I watched, while you were on your girls' night at Umi, I watched the Wham documentary on Netflix, and it blew my mind.
Last
Do you know who?
Christmas,
Yeah.
I gave you my heart.
Exactly. I thought Wham, so they were only together for 4 years. I think it's like 82 to 86. I always thought that they were like a NSYNC, right? Or Backstreet
Yeah,
Boys.
yeah.
But they're not. They were two friends from childhood, Andrew and George Michael. And they wrote all that music. Like it was them. It was George Michael. He wrote it all. I mean, Andrew wrote a lot of the early stuff, but all the songs, like "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go," that was a note that Andrew left on the refrigerator. He was taking a nap and he wrote a note to George and said, "Wake me up before you go go." He was like being funny. George saw that note and went and wrote the song.
Yeah.
"Wake Me Up Before You Go Go."
I'm gonna have to watch it.
It's so good. And
Maybe when you have your girls' night, I'll watch it.
yeah, my next girls' night,
Yeah.
you definitely watch that. So if you grew up in that era, it just was pretty fascinating. I think even if you didn't, because it's such a cool story of friendship. And Andrew,
Well, and everyone loves George Michael's. Like even if you don't realize that you love his songs, like if you're younger,
Yeah.
they've all been remixed, they've all been remade. The tributes, all the things.
and you hear him like they have, I guess, all this archival footage. So he's narrating it, and Andrew's narrating it. You never see Andrew, so you don't have to see him old. They're young the whole time. They're Wham the entire time. He's narrating it, and it's about friendship. It's about Andrew seeing that George Michael was special and talented, and he basically created the band for George. And then once George became this huge megastar out of Wham, he knew it was time for George to go on his own. I thought maybe they broke up and they were like mad at each other, and they weren't. They were still best friends their whole life. It's crazy.
Wonder if he's getting a little bit of like kickbacks,
Well, I'm sure
like for every George Michael song that comes out, he gets.
not George Michael, but for Wham. I'm sure he's still.
I don't know
making
though.
money off
Like
Wham.
maybe he was still helping him when he was George Michael. Maybe he was still working in the background. Did they talk about that?
Yeah, they did talk about it. They didn't really work
So what has Andrew been doing the rest of his time? So he like taps out of Wham.
They didn't talk about it.
Watch it. I have all these questions.
Yeah, we'll have to research that. They didn't talk about that. It was just
It's probably something like really lame. Like he went back to law school and became a lawyer, and then like George Michael's is out like raging.
I think he's still in the industry. I think he's still in the industry.
Okay.
Anyway, it was awesome. I thought it was awesome.
So watch the Wham documentary. Is that what it's called? It's called the Wham documentary, or is there a name that people should look for?
I think it's just Wham.
Wham on Netflix.
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 Yeah.
Okay.
It looks
All right.
like one
So
of those,
search Wham on Netflix. Hopefully you'll find it.
And I added Wham to our Pool Vibes playlist that will go on the Culture Edit too.
Okay.
So,
Perfect. Pool Vibes playlist.
Yeah.
If you ever want some good playlists, Chad works really hard on curating his playlists. I'm working on client work. Chad's making playlists.
That's-
Just kidding. I don't know. I've been really into remixes lately, like kind of like club remixes of old songs.
Yeah. You take my old songs and then you go find the.
Yeah, and I go find like a upbeat club remix. Oh, we also did headshots this week, so I'm pretty excited. New headshots. We haven't gotten them in a long time, so the cover art will be updated soon. I
Yeah.
know you all care so much about that, but I'm excited.
Yeah. I was glad to work with Allison again. We've used her for headshots for over 10 years. She's magic.
Yeah.
Magic. We haven't been able to get her the last few times we've needed stuff, but she was willing to come into our studio on Monday while everyone else was partying.
She just gets it. She's a magician with lighting.
Yeah.
She's like, we're going to make your cheekbones pop. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Make those cheekbones pop. That's what I want.
So if you need headshots or portraits, put a link in the bio.
Yeah. I'll link to her website.
Yeah.
Okay. So digging into the culture edit, do you want to start with the first article, which is why corporate America is worried about affirmative action? Because we talked about it last week, kind of as a prediction. There weren't a lot of articles out about it, but now it seems like people are on the same page.
Only to say, I told you so. I mean, there was no one was connecting the dots to that decision when we talked about it last week, and now this week it was Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Everyone is now connecting those dots. I've had conversations with CHROs and CEOs in the last week that are also asking a lot about what this means for our D&I efforts. Again, we covered that in the podcast last week and also in our newsletter last week. It's going to have a chilling effect is my prediction on D&I efforts. And,
Yeah, and I think that people are just going to have to be really authentic, really, really authentic as to why you're doing certain initiatives, starting certain programs, because if people feel that there's a lot of authenticity behind people's actions, I think they're less likely to sue you. Whereas if it feels performative, people just get so pissed about that nowadays.
Yep. And we're seeing that a lot.
So
we spent the whole podcast talking about that last week, but it's probably one of the biggest topics in workplace right now. So also in the culture edit, a lot of statistics are coming in from the tech layoffs. I think no surprise there in the tech industry that women were disproportionately laid off to males, which is kind of crazy because there's hardly any women in the tech industry.
well, I think that's what makes it so much worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But digging into that, obviously less women in leadership roles. And so, leadership roles are typically the last ones to go. More women in functional areas that don't drive hard sales or hard revenue. A lot less women.
HR.
Yeah, a lot less women in technical roles where they're kind of keeping the company afloat. And then also one thing that I read that was interesting is, so it was addressed in this article that more women are working from home than men. And so men are getting more face time, which makes people not want to lay you off if you have more face time. And so then I looked that up, and there's another article in Fortune that a government study had been released, or statistics had been released in 2022. 28% of men are still working from home in 2022, but 41% of women are still working from home. So men are drastically going back to the office quicker than women. I think it's for pretty obvious reasons, probably mostly around children, childcare. I kind of been saying in my mind lately, like, we can't whine about something that we can control in certain ways. And as
who is we here?
Women. Sorry, women.
Okay, yeah.
Like women, like we can't complain about things that we can try and control to the best of our ability. And so obviously we don't have kids, and so it's different, but I do have a lot of friends that have kids. I have a lot of, we have a lot of clients that have children. And I think that there's this assumption that if I have kids, you need to bend to be flexible around my working world and around my life. And that's just not a realistic way to think. Even if it would be the best way to think, in a perfect world, everyone would be super empathetic. And even though there's a lot of men that have kids, if they're not the primary caregiver, they're still not going to be as empathetic to you as a working mother. It's not right or wrong. It's just reality. I think you just have to understand the reality of the world and make a decision. Do I want to do things like figure out ways to be more visible? Or do I want to just say, you know what, I prioritize taking care of my kids. So if I don't get that promotion, if I'm not prioritized over people that are going into the office, then you kind of have to accept that that's your decision, because that's reality.
Yeah, and there's also an article we're including in this newsletter too around Gen X is now in charge. So that's my generation. It's people born between 1970 and 80. part of that article is the point of the article is talking about it's people in their 40s are now in charge, and that's changing the workforce, and that's changing how people work, and that's why there's more flexibility. COVID accelerated that. COVID accelerated there being more flexibility. But now with a younger generation in charge of organizations, they're more willing to be flexible. But it also talked about how so many Gen X women are more prone to working at home. So it's right in line with what you were researching as well.
And it's just like I see as so when we go into clients' offices and we're meeting with, let's just say like men or women for that matter, like, but in leadership roles, I can tell that they don't take people as seriously if they're constantly working from home.
Yeah.
And it's not an intentional thing. It's really not like out of malice of, oh, I don't like this person. It is just this inherent perception of, if I'm in the office and I'm the leader and I don't see your face, I don't know what you're doing. And even if they trust people, which I think a lot, especially a lot of leaders we work with, they really do trust their people and they do have flexible working arrangements. I can just tell that the people that are in the office just have that little bit more of an edge with the leadership team.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all it takes when it comes to promotion and opportunity.
And so that's the advice you give young people.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be in the office every day, but if you're just going to check out and never go into the office, I don't think you can expect to ever get promoted, honestly.
Yeah.
Unless you have like a really unique skill, like provide value, but that doesn't require you to interact with people. But that's very few roles.
Yeah. And it's hard. I think it's also hard to learn the soft skills that you need to move around up and into different roles in organizations without interacting in person a lot.
I mean, that's
soft skills, like communication skills.
That's a conversation that you and I separately had with two individuals this week who are younger and getting out into the working world, or they're still in college. You know, I was talking to a young lady who I'm pretty close with. She's ridiculously smart. And she was telling, I'm asking like, what are you doing for your master's? And she's at Georgia Tech. We were just talking about how the industry, her industry specifically, like programming, and I think she said her master's program focuses on machine learning.
Oh, yeah.
And so I asked, like, are you worried that those jobs are going to be replaced by AI at some point? And I know nothing about machine learning. I barely know anything about computer science. And she was saying, yeah, there's definitely certain things. And so we get talking about how important it is to learn these soft skills. My advice to her, seeing all of these women that are leaders and women that have moved up through the ranks that are in our clients' companies, a lot of them have really good presentation skills and executive presence. And I was just telling her she would be a standout star if she took, a public speaking course and like something like Speakeasy. They're here in Atlanta. I've taken their course. It's almost like an acting class that gets you really comfortable presenting and speaking in front of people. It's amazing. It changed my life. I'm obsessed with it. I tell everyone to go through it.
Wow. Shout out to Kip at Speakeasy.
Yeah, I mean, they're not even paying for this. So, but I really do. I tell everyone to go through it because I think in the future, if we are in roles, especially as creatives or as computer science majors where we're doing very technical things, a lot of that's going to be replaced by AI. And so we have to be able to be strategic, formulate ideas, and then translate those ideas in a way that's shared with others at varying different levels of an organization. So you have to be able to speak to leadership, but you also have to be able to translate that message to the front line. People of who you're working with, translate that message to coders, translate that message to marketing. If you can perfect your storytelling ability and translating ability to communicate your ideas to all those different stakeholder groups, you're going to crush it.
Yeah, I think that's the advice that every young person should be hearing, because AI is going to create a working environment where you don't need as many tech skills, but you're going to need communication skills. Yep. Everyone's going to, you're no longer just going to be able to be in a dark room and code all day. And so I think learning those skills is pretty critical for young people today. And they're not getting it. Like they're not getting it in college. We didn't get it in college. I guess I got it in law school. Like that's what.
I think at really good private universities, there's certain people that are getting it, especially if their parents are encouraging them to do it, or they have advisors at school that are encouraging them. We've heard recently just from a local university here in Atlanta, terrible advice.
Yeah, terrible advice.
I mean, some of the worst advice I've ever heard, like don't learn anything else except the one thing that you're getting your degree in.
Yeah,
That
don't.
might be the worst advice I've ever
And
heard.
we've had multiple students tell us that's the advice they're getting from this university.
My jaw is on the floor
Yeah,
because that's so scary. It's scary. And look, if you're going to be, you're like an idiot savant and you're literally going to be like a artist and you're just on this trajectory of you're the next Monet. You're like, I mean, that's probably a terrible example. Or, you're the next great singer, Ariana Grande, your like voice is like an angel or whatever it may be. I think focusing on your skill, that's obvious. But there's such a small percentage of people that need to hone their skills so perfectly because they're in that 0.00001% of people that can do that. It doesn't apply to most people. And so most people, I think we need more Renaissance men and women. We need more of that mindset. Like, I'm going to be a Renaissance woman. I'm going to learn as much as possible in different areas and obviously still perfect skills as much as I can. But I need to educate myself on a lot more than just the one thing that I learned in college.
I agree. That advice that we've heard these young folks getting is pretty shocking, but it's because they're getting advice from college professors that never worked.
Academics.
Yeah, they've never worked in the real life.
Yeah. And they're only working in this one little small piece of the university system.
Yeah.
And so in their world, I mean, I guess sure, if you want to go stay in academia, then yes, you obviously need to really focus on your one thing that you're learning because you have to teach that to other people. But to just give that advice blanketly to everyone, it's just insane.
People are probably like, how are you talking to college kids all the time?
It's the bike.
It's the bike. We spend
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours riding with college kids to 60-year-olds. So you get to have these really long conversations. But it's funny to think that we can have a day where we spend talking to Fortune 100 CEOs and then talk to college kids for hours.
Yeah. But it gives you good perspective of what's happening in the world because you just hear everything. So speaking of Gen Z, do we want to talk about the new social media platform?
Do you even know about the new social media platform?
I know about it, but I am just, I'm so, I'm so mentally tired of social media. I mean, I like social media. Obviously, I mean, I'm on social media all the time, but I feel like I don't have the capacity to add another thing. And I don't really like Twitter as it is. It just has never resonated with me and the way that I like to use social media. I really like videos. I really like audio. And I like photography. I don't like tweets. I don't like reading people's like 2-sentence thought.
Yeah.
It doesn't speak to me as a person, but I know obviously there's a lot of people out there that like it.
Yeah. So if you don't know, Meta, Facebook, Instagram created a new social media platform called Threads, which is a direct copy of Twitter, in hopes that everyone that uses Twitter will come over to Threads. I downloaded it. It looks just like, it's very easy transition to. I don't know if you noticed it.
I haven't downloaded
Basically, it takes all your followers and who you follow in Instagram, and boom, it just transfers it right over to Threads. So that, I think, gives them a pretty competitive advantage versus like these other ones like Blue Sky. They're trying to start from zero. And I did it the day that because I wanted to see what it looked like the day that it was released. And so just like every day since then, I'm getting notifications of people that I'm connected to on Instagram or Facebook, I guess, also downloading it. I think they've got over Friday, they had like over 20 million users.
So have you actually used it? Like, have you sent? What are they calling it? So Twitter is a tweet. What are they, like thread? I'm threading.
A thread. I threaded one time. I responded to Sam from Good Wipes. Of course he's on it. Being funny. He wants to go on podcast, so I told him that we would add him to our guest list. So that was
he would be funny.
He'd be hilarious, actually. We need to move him to tier 1 guest.
Yeah. But so this week, just segueing, we wanted to test out a new segment on the podcast around what we're listening to. So we talk about the culture edit and what we're reading. I probably have listened to 15 different podcasts this week. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, mostly around communications and PR strategy. but I wake up at 5. Chad knows. I wake up at 5:30 pretty much every morning, and the first thing I do is start listening to as many educational podcasts as I can.
That's at the gym, by the way.
Yeah, at the gym or on the trainer. I really like doing that. Throughout the day, I try not to get distracted by listening to stuff, but then as soon as I get home, I pretty much start listening to educational podcasts again.
So this speaks to us not having kids again.
Yeah. Basically until I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And Chad's similar. He has a few different podcast listening habits. You enjoy educate. You read a lot more educational stuff.
Yeah.
And then you listen to entertainment.
Yes. Yeah. I only listen to one entertainment podcast, but it comes out 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday,
You
and Friday.
spend a lot of time listening to that podcast.
Well, I spend a lot of time walking your dog. And so
My dog.
So
There we
that's what I'm listening to is when I'm walking Hutch, and he comes to the office with us every day too. So
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
it's that time.
Let's get into it. So this segment around what we're listening to. So I'm going to go this week, and I've created 3 buckets of focus around different studies and research that I've heard about this week. I'm not going to get into the exact study, the exact person who is the researcher. I'll link all of that so that you can go read it or read about the research and the study or the experiment. And I'm going to link the different podcasts that I listen to. The overarching idea this week is about comms hacking. So it's like biohacking. Everyone knows what biohacking is, especially if you're a health and fitness freak. It's doing all those little things to try and, stop time, trying to age backwards, trying to find the fountain of youth, trying to exercise more. But biohacking is really those tiny little things that add up to try and make ourselves healthier. So I think, why don't we focus on comms hacking? And so it's not this, let's overhaul our entire communication strategy, our entire CEO strategy. It's what can we do incrementally to build off of things we already have and build off of knowledge we already have, to create more of a connection to our teams and to our employees. So the first bucket is transparency and confessions. There is a Standford study done during the George Floyd time when companies were coming out, issuing press releases, or executives were coming out and essentially issuing their stance on what was happening in the country at that time. So
summer of 2020.
Yeah, summer of 2020. So a bunch of researchers at Stanford started collecting all of those press releases and headlines, essentially. Mm-hmm. And they found that companies that came, and a lot of the companies were coming out to say what they were going to do differently or what they had done wrong or just making a statement. But long and short of it is they found that companies that came out and just kind of acted self-righteous, condoning certain things, but not admitting to any of their own pitfalls, people did not think positively of those companies. But if a company came out and said, we hear everyone, we hear the world, what's happening, we hear the US is hurting, and people in the US, people at our jobs, or at our office, or company, if they came out and said, we hear you and we've messed up in these areas, we need to do better, and this is what we're going to do, that act of confession significantly increased the way people perceive the company or the leader.
Mm-hmm. Which was the exact advice we were giving organizations during that time.
Definitely. Because I think it just goes back to no one's perfect and people aren't stupid. So employees aren't stupid. They know that companies aren't perfect. They just want to hear that you're not perfect, you're owning up to it, and that you're going to do better.
Yep.
So that was kind of one research that I found that was interesting, that goes through just that transparency around communication. And then there was another Harvard study. It was done in 2022, I believe. They found that specifically around diversity. So remember last week we talked about the difference between diversity and inclusion. So they dug into diversity inclusion efforts and the way companies were communicating around that. They found that if a company disclosed their diversity numbers, so this has nothing to do with inclusion, just diversity numbers.
Like their demographics.
Their demographics. People thought more favorably of the company if they disclosed their demographics, even if the demographics were not outstanding. Even if they didn't have that diverse of a workforce, just coming out and saying, hey, these are our numbers, we're being transparent with you, consumers and employees thought more positively of a company doing that than a company that doesn't disclose their diversity numbers, but is constantly doing performative communication around inclusion efforts. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to people are smart. They can see through the BS.
Yeah. So the example would be like an organization saying we're supporting or we're celebrating International Women's Month.
Yeah.
We only have 20% female leadership. We're engaging in all these programs to change that versus an organization that would just say we're celebrating International Women's Month.
Exactly. The end. I was listening to another podcast, and one of the guests is an expert in strategic communication and leadership. And so he was, at the end of the podcast, they always ask, what, if there's one piece of advice that you could give, what's it going to be? And he said, sharing failures mixed with success makes you a more influential leader. And so he had said throughout his time coaching different leaders and as a leader himself, he saw that the best leaders, when they communicated, would communicate their own pitfalls and their own failures to reach a goal or to achieve something, mixed in with positive things of reaching goals in order to be a more influential leader versus leaders that only talked about the wins all the time.
Yeah.
And again, it just goes back to authenticity. No one's perfect. No one wins all the time.
It's our number one strategic advice to CEOs and executives is you just got to be real.
Exactly.
And the challenge is, though, that most leaders came up through an organization where that wasn't necessary. So they don't know how to be real. Like they think that they have to be someone that they're not, or they have to be super buttoned up and they have to be very careful what they say or very performative in how they act. And so it's a completely different leadership style that's needed right now. But these are the kind of things that we're having conversations with, and this research is fantastic because it backs up exactly the advice that we give. Exactly.
And so the second bucket is around employee motivation engagement. A Stanford professor who studies consumer motivation was looking at what you can do communication-wise to keep consumers engaged with your product. And so in thinking about that, how does that translate to employee motivation? And she says that the three things she focuses on, or that they've seen people focus on, is start small, social support, and journey mindset. And so when that comes to employee engagement, start small, meaning communicate it simply. Start with small efforts of communication. You don't have to change the world at once. You just have to engage people a little bit at a time.
Yep.
And if you can't communicate it to your family simply, you probably can't communicate to your employees in a simple way. So start small with communication efforts. Social support. Your leaders need to be supporting your communication efforts more than anyone else. And so providing that social support of making sure that people really feel connected back to the company is really, really important. And then journey mindset. So instead of focusing on the end goal, because a lot of times at work, we're always communicating the end goal. We're opening this new place. Have this new product, and everyone's rushing towards that end. And a lot of times people will start out really strong. We see this all the time with a big, there's a new, let's just say a product. New product. Everyone's excited about it. We've, talked about it internally. And then people get really excited, let's just say at the end of the year or at the close of when the product launches, because people are excited that it's over, essentially. Yeah. And everything in between tends to fall off. And so keeping that journey mindset when you're a leader, which means just communicating the journey and the importance of the journey, not just the end result, will significantly change your employee motivation.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times where we kind of supplement our services is that journey mindset. We are kind of the journey communicators for a lot of companies.
Yeah. I mean, that's the roadmap that we build for campaigns is really about consistency and cadence for that very reason.
Exactly. And then the last bucket is leadership communication. This one I'll hit on kind of quickly, but there was some really good thoughts that came out of some of the podcasts. One is when the interviewer was asking some of these leaders to impart, their best advice they'd ever been given. There's a few things. It was always remember that they're hearing it for the first time. And so I think as leaders, we can forget that when we're speaking to our employees or a broader organization, we've been hearing whatever it is we're about to communicate 700 times.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it ad nauseum in order to get to this point where we're communicating it. But people that you're communicating to are still hearing it for the first time. And you have to remind yourself of that. You have to be a translator to your audience. And so you have to really think about who's your audience. Is it the front line? Is it other leaders? Is it people managers? And the best leaders can translate a message to all of these different audiences. And that goes to what we always speak to is you have to segment your communication as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And then
and that's different than what most communications functions do internally. They have one message for all employees.
Exactly. There's a difference between translating communication and broadcasting. Mm-hmm. We don't need to broadcast. We need to be translators, strategic translators, and then meet people where they are. Have face-to-face conversations, have videos, so you can understand what mindset they're in. There's another study showed that face-to-face and video is more effective, obviously, at communicating and at building relationships than non-face-to-face videos. But what was interesting is they dug into that, and there was actually other people, they were digging into Zoom. And so they were saying, should leaders be communicating in person or should they be communicating over Zoom? And what they found is that most leaders should be communicating face-to-face, there was some leaders who were so intense and so what employees called aggressive that they actually performed better communicating over Zoom. And so that got me thinking, if you're a leader that's less dynamic, that really is kind of like a wallflower, you should 100% communicate in person. But if you're a leader that might come across as aggressive or intimidating, communicating over video is actually a better way to go. And I thought that was interesting because it lessens your intimidation factor.
Yeah. I think most of those leaders don't know that they're intimidating, so they need someone to tell them.
Well, no, they might not, but as a strategic communication function, you should know. Yeah. You should be identifying what type of communicator your leaders are, and when you set their communication strategy, you should say, okay, CEO is insanely dynamic, not overwhelming. We're getting her out in front of everyone in person town halls, but our COO, he's a little abrasive. And we're going to pull him back. We're going to create a podcast with him. We're not going to send him out to the town halls where he's going to be bashing people over the head with aggressive communication styles. Yeah. Yeah. So those are the three nuggets that I got from the different podcasts I listened to. I know that was a lot, but I did think it was pretty valuable.
Well, the people have told us they wanted a lot. So
yeah.
There you go. You got what you wanted. So this is our fourth episode where it's just you and I. We talked about guests in the last episode. Excited that the next episode, number 5, will have a guest. We're really excited about it. And we're looking forward to talking with her and sharing a really interesting story.
Do we want to give a hint as to who she is?
No, we'll let it be a surprise.
Well, I think like giving a little teaser because I mean she's the head of culture at Newell Rubbermaid, or was the head of culture at Newell Rubbermaid for a long time. So she's got horsepower. But women out there, if you're genuinely curious about how you move up the corporate ladder as a female, how you become a better communicator, a better leader, tune into this podcast because Joanna is that leader.
Yeah. For sure.
She is that person that you can learn from. So we're recording with her tomorrow morning, bright and early. So we're very excited about it.
Yeah. All right. Outside of that, I think we're good.
All right. Over and out.